Hey guys, in this video I'm gonna show you how you can make this very nice laminated slingshot. The video is meant as a compliment to my contest entry at instructables.com, and of course I'll put a link to that in the description down below. Well, I don't think I have anything left to say, so let's start with the project. So these are all the things we're gonna need: a miter box, 2 wooden IKEA cutting boards, a hacksaw, a set of metal files and wood rasps, some wood glue, a coping saw, some 10mm thick plywood, make sure it's high quality, don't buy the cheap stuff, some exotic hardwood, and some sandpaper. So we'll start off by making the core of the slingshot. I would love to use some aluminum for this, but because I don't have any aluminum, and because this is a plywood contest, I will use plywood. As you might already have noticed, I have already drawn the template onto the plywood, and the template I'm using is called the TAOW Hammer by TheArtOfWeapons. I'll put a link to his channel in the description below. So to cut out the slingshot core, I'm gonna use my coping saw. If you don't have a coping saw or a scroll saw, you could also use something like a jigsaw. So as you can see, this was the first attempt. It didn't turn out too good because I cut way too close to the lines. Therefore I tried a second time, and this time I made sure to leave quite a distance from the line so that I can fine tune the shape later. I'm thinking about making some weird laminations using this miter box. However, I can't decide which of these wood pieces I'm gonna use. All these pieces were sent to me by the user Jeb on the Slingshot forum. He was kind enough to go to his local hardware store and purchase all these pieces and then send them to me across the world without making any profit himself. I'm super thankful for that. The funny thing is that these have been stored on a shelf for 6 months. I haven't used them at all because they're so precious to me, and as you can see they have very beautiful grain. So if we go back to the project, you can see that I have already drawn a lamination design right here. These thin lines are supposed to be these 5mm thick slabs, and then these thicker parts are supposed to be the cutting boards. Judging by the side template of the slingshot, we can see that we will need a total of 4.5 cm thick sheet material to be able to make this exact handle. So what I'm gonna do is, instead of marking a line right here and cut out a thin strip of wood that is only gonna be 5mm thin, the idea here is to mark a line 16mm from the edge, cut that out, and then place it upwards on the plywood. Then it will have the same height as the cutting boards. To cut out these pieces you could use a jigsaw, but I decided to go one step further and make a jig for it. This is the miter box that you saw before, clamped down in a vise with a jigsaw clamped upside down. We now have 3 similar pieces, and if you want to know the measurements, they are 5mm times 16mm times 15 centimeters. We will have to sand these edges and make them flat enough for gluing. When you're sanding, don't bother sanding both edges, because there's only gonna be one edge that is laminated to the plywood core. Now that the thin strips are made, we're gonna move on to making the larger ones, and for that we're gonna use the cutting boards. The one I've got here comes from IKEA. It's solid bamboo, 16mm thick, and it only costs €8. Definitely a great deal. This surface is oiled, which means that it won't stick to wood glue so well. Therefore we're gonna need to use some rough grit sandpaper and sand away as much oil as we possibly can. Now it should look like this. So up until this point I haven't decided how wide I want these strips to be. Now I have decided that I want them to be twice as wide as these, which means 10mm. When I ran the wood into the blade it started jumping like this, and that made for a really bad cut. Therefore I'm not gonna use this jig anymore for these pieces, only for the thin ones. To save the situation, I have cleaned up this edge right here, and I have also drawn a line 15mm from the edge, and what I'm gonna do now is cut it out using the jigsaw. That turned out really good, and as you can see it is really straight and all the sides are square. So this was my original idea for the lamination. The maple sits in the middle and to the left is some European beech, to the right is some bamboo. However, this isn't the contrast I'm looking for, because all these three look very similar to each other. Therefore I'm gonna skip the European beech and replace it with some oak. We're still gonna use the maple for the lines that goes across the slingshot, and for the line in the middle we're gonna use some red sandalwood. I made this sketch right here to show you what I mean. The bamboo and the oak are divided by the red sandalwood that goes across the slingshot, and it is split up by the maple. The top will be made using European beech, and this is gonna be one solid piece. This means there won't be any lamination to this piece other than the connection here and the gluing to the slingshot core. That was all about the design. Let's start with the actual lamination. So what I've done here is that I've cut the oak, the maple and the bamboo into 5 cm long pieces. Together these two will make the lamination that you can see right here. And that lamination is made by angling these pieces and resting them against a flat edge and make sure they have the same angle, both of these. I draw this line right here for 2 reasons. The first one is that it helps me align the pieces while gluing. The second one is that I now have a straight line to follow with my saw. Basically, what I'm gonna do is glue these together using wood glue, cut the sides off and cut it in half. So this is what it should look like once you have done all these steps. I had to sand like crazy to get this inner sides here straight, but eventually I got it all right. I just realized that these pieces, together with the plywood core, is not thick enough to make this exact handle. Therefore what I'm gonna have to do is make another core and glue it to this one. While this dries, I'm gonna cut out 2 pieces like this from the red sandalwood. Now we can start the laminating. I have already glued together these pieces using wood glue, but it has such a long drying time, so when gluing everything to the base I'm gonna use 2-part epoxy. So now I've glued these pieces on, but to be able to attach this one, I will have to cut these pieces flush with the slingshot core. Now we can start making the sides flush. For this you would normally use a wood rasp and just trim down material until it's flat. But because I have one of these power files, I'm gonna use that instead. Now keep in mind that if you do this by hand, you first have to trim the edges down so that the wood doesn't splinter. I'd say this looks pretty symmetrical. Now I've drawn on the handle template to the slingshot and I'm just gonna cut it out. We now have the front and the side profile cut out and can start shaping this thing. And there's really not much about it, you just round the edges until it feels nice in your hand. Rough shaping turned out really great. I mean, it looks really cool and it feels very comfortable in the hand. Now we're gonna do the final shaping using metal files. It took me quite some time, but I was able to fine tune the shape and get it just how I wanted it to. The surface is still a bit rough though and I want it to be smooth, so now we're gonna sand it. The idea is to start at 80 grits, move on to 120, 240, 600 and then finish it off at 1000. However, because I'm using linseed oil as a finish, I will apply the first coat after using the 120 grit sandpaper. So I put on another 5 layers of linseed oil, and that equals to a total of 8 layers. If I had some paste finishing wax I would have used it now, but as you can see I still have a little bit of shine. The slingshot is now completely finished, and in my opinion it looks really good and it is very ergonomic. Here are some pictures. This is by far my best slingshot up to date. So guys, I really hope you liked this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I have a shooting video coming up in a few days where I will be trying out the slingshot and see how it performs. Make sure you don't miss out on that. So that was all I had for today. I'll see you soon. Bye.